You don't need complex automations to offload a bunch of busy work in your business. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build an automation that extracts information from things like invoices and contracts and leases and stores it in CRMs like Google Sheets, Airtable, and Smart Suite. So if you're tired of doing data entry, this video is going to be for you. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into the tutorial and get started. Okay, this is the workflow that I built out in n8n. Now, the use case that I built this for was for like a landlord or an apartment manager, somebody that has to send out and get leases signed, which is basically a contract for the tenant saying that they're going to live in a property for a given amount of time, and all the stuff that's sort of included in that. And so, what I wanted to help a manager do is avoid having to take all of this data that's available in a lease and manually extract that and put it into a database of some kind or a CRM, like Airtable or Google Sheets. And I was able to automate that entire process. And so I want to show you how to do it. To get started, I'm actually going to run the automation so you can see what the final output is supposed to look like. And then I'm going to take you through each step, and I'm going to show you why I did what I did and how it works. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. First things first is my Google Drive folder. You'll see that there's nothing there. I'm not going to show you my inbox, but I will show you the CRM, and you'll see that we do not have any records. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out the email to myself with the lease attached, and then we're going to wait for the workflow to execute. So I'm going to go ahead and send that, and then we're going to go ahead and wait for this to execute. Okay, and there it is. It's running, and success. All right, and so let's go ahead and walk through the final product. So we have the lease. If you remember when I showed you before, there was nothing in it. We now have our signed lease stored in a folder for safekeeping. We now have a couple emails from Airtable, which I will go over later. And then we have a record that was created from the lease. So let's go ahead and jump through the workflow, and we're going to go node by node, and I'm going to explain every step. So this starts with a trigger from Gmail. And what this is doing is that it's pinging the inbox. I have it going every minute, though you probably don't need to do that. You can probably extend it, but it is looking in the inbox every minute for emails and attachments with certain parameters. And so what I have here is an event that is message received. So the first thing is an email that has come in, and then it's going to do a search for the word lease somewhere in the file type. And so long as it has the word lease in the file type, then what we're going to do is download it. So that way, we can use it. And then you can see here, we have the lease, lease PDF, file extension type is PDF. And let's go ahead and take a quick look at it. So this is kind of a standard lease agreement, right? It's just explaining, the contract details between two parties. You have the date, you have the tenant, you have the landlord, you have the address for both the landlord and the tenant, and then just the details for things like rent, late fees, security deposits, and so on. And then everyone signs it and returns it. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to extract all this important information that we want to store, and then we're going to store it. And we're going to do all of this automatically. So the first thing I did was I set up a Google Drive. And what I wanted to do here was store the invoice in its original form. So that way we had something to go back to. What you don't want to do, in my opinion, is, extract all this data and then somehow forget about the original source of that data. The apartment manager probably will want to store this somewhere, right? In a Google Drive, or they're going to want to print it off and store a hard copy somewhere in their office. So let's go ahead and open that up. So you see here that the lease PDF came through, and then all we did here is connect the node to our Google Drive. All the options here, we chose this is a file, and we're going to upload that file that has an attachment, the data field name of attachment _0. And then we're going to upload that to the drive with a parent folder of leases -automations, which is what we have here. And here is the lease, just like it was here in the node. We're going to test the step 2. Actually, we don't actually need to test it here, but that's fine. Actually, let's go ahead and open that up and just kind of see. Yeah, so that just kind of shows you just the data behind the file itself. Nothing we need right now. So the next step here, or rather the first step, is taking this PDF and running it through a node where we extract the data from it. And this one is actually built into n8n, whereas like other file types like images, you need to go to a third-party source. So let's go ahead and open this up and take a look at it. So all we did here for an operation is we are extracting from PDF, and the input binary field attachment _0 matches the name here. And then that's it. So we'll go ahead and test this step. And what you're going to see here is we're going to get a bunch of data back from this. But the data that we're actually going to use or we're going to start using is under this text box here. And you'll see here that it has extracted all of the text from the lease agreement. Now, we don't need all that information. What we need for our CRM is things like the name, the address, unit, type, and so on. We don't need, all of the sort of, I don't want to call it filler text, but I mean, there's just a lot of context or a lot of, text in between the data points that we don't need and we need to be able to extract. So to do that, we're going to add a code node. Now, this here, admittedly, I actually use the Ask AI function to help me write. What I have found is that this does a pretty good job of getting me 70–80% of the way there, and then I start running into issues. And so what I did is I took this and I uploaded it to ChatGPT and I asked it for help. And through that, I was able to tighten up the script to get what I wanted to store into my CRM. And so a lot of what this script is RegEx, which is an abbreviation for regular expressions. And regular expressions is, I'm not sure if it's like a code. I'd have to actually look that up. I should know what it is. But what it does in a vacuum is it looks for patterns, and then using those patterns, it extracts the information that you want. So what we needed to do is we needed to go through this information using RegEx, and from that, we were able to pull the address, and we were able to pull the date, and we were able to pull the name and unit number and so on. And that's what all this stuff is here. So let's go ahead and test this step. And what you'll see here is that we got the tenant, we got the address, we got the unit, we got the type, the start date, rent, due date, payback, for the payment method, late fee, and so on. Now, when you first start doing this, especially if you use, for example, like a different lease agreement than what I have here, what you're going to find in the beginning is that you're going to pull a lot of information that you don't need. So with the start date, you might have some of the text that came before or after it. Or in other cases, you might have null because the regex isn't picking up what you wanted it to. And so it's going to take several tries going back and forth with the Ask AI or ChatGPT in order to get this dialed in just right. One thing I would definitely suggest here is if you're a landlord or if you're somebody that's dealing with contracts or invoices or lease agreements or anything along these lines, is to, one, make sure your lease or your contract or your file is really, really, really simple. And the other thing I would have you do is or I would suggest you do, is try to get the file returned to you in such a way that there isn't a lot of errors or things like spaces, because things like spaces in here will throw the regex off. And so if somebody, for example, were to type this up in a computer, they were to fill it out on the computer before sending it back to you, and they had 2 or 3 spaces, between each word, or at the start of a field or the end of a field, it's just going to make it harder for the regex to have a pattern that will work for every person that turns in a lease. So just something to keep in mind. It's going to be a bit finicky, but you 10, 20 minutes of chat GPT and you can get it to work. And then so from this code, it ships it over to Airtable. So we needed to connect it to our Airtable account. And what we wanted to do is create a record, create or update a record. And we had to choose our list, which in this case is St. Helens Apartments. And from that list, we needed it to do, we wanted it to go to the lease table. And then we wanted to map each column manually, which we set up down here. For the columns to match on, I chose ID for this tutorial. However, I think in the long run, it would make sense to, you could use ID if you want, but I would try to find something else for the column to match on. So that way you increase the likelihood that you didn't have duplicate records, for people, the same people living in the same unit and things like that. For this, it worked, but I think if you were to stress test this, you might find some sort of weakness that would result in an error. So I think ID worked here for this case, but I would probably try to find another way to get all this stuff to match up. You might try ID, name, and unit, and kind of mess with that and see how that works. But something to think about. Now to match up each of the columns here, the name, the address, unit, and so on. All I did here was go into table, and all I did was just drag and drop, each column name. So the tenant, put it here, the name, address, dragged and dropped here, the unit, we dragged and dropped here, the type, dragged and dropped here, and so on. So then we test this step, and we should actually get a second entry here. Or actually, maybe not, because it didn't duplicate it. But I do believe I did get another email from it. So that actually takes care of the lease workflow. You get the lease from the tenant, which something I didn't note earlier, I would recommend that you have a standard way of naming your lease agreements when you send it by email. That way you have a standard. It just makes it easier to build out the workflow when you have these things be consistent all throughout, everything that you can control anyway. And so I would have your file type be like lease, or the lease and the unit number, or lease and the unit number and the tenant name, or something along those lines. That way you can set up the search field in such a way that it'll work for all leases that come through this workflow. So that takes care of the workflow. Super simple. It's going to eliminate all of this sort of redundant data entry that a lot of people need to do, but we're not done yet. So we're going to, the next thing I want to show you here. Oh, actually, there it is. So there's the second record from doing the test here a second ago. So what I want to show you next is, now that we've created a new record of somebody that just signed a lease agreeing to, stay in your building, I'm going to show you a couple automations that I built out in Airtable just to, just kind of add a little something to this to take a little bit more work off your plate. So the very first thing that happens here is when a new record is created, it sends an email. My plan was for this to go to like a landlord manager. So you can see an email here. Mickey Mouse just signed their lease. Hi, Peg Leg Pete. Hope your day is going swell. Blah, 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 blah. Cheers, your friendly real estate automation. Now, this email is going to the landlord or apartment manager to let them know that the lease has been signed and everything has been the record has been created. So that way they can hop in here and they can check it out, make sure everything's accurate, and then they can go on with their day, and they didn't have to do the work manually. Still not done yet though. The next thing that I have set up here is, let's check, I believe it's this one. So I had this set up so that the email fired off as soon as the record is created, just so I can show you for the purpose of this tutorial. But the idea behind this automation was to send an email to the tenant at, say like 11 months into their lease, when they have about 1 month left, to let them know that their lease is almost up and that they can renew. And so you'll see here is we have a email to the tenant saying, I hope your day is going well. I'm sending you a message to let you know your lease is expiring soon. We enjoy having you here. If you'd like to renew your lease, please review and sign the attached document. And we need to have this document signed and returned to us no later than, and this is a variable from the end date here. So 3/2026, which is what this should be. Yep, 3/2026. To avoid any complications in renewing your lease, please let us know if you have any questions. Thanks, Peg Leg Pete. What I didn't do here, just because it would require a little bit more effort in terms of adding the lease renewal. This is the point to where there might need to be some manual effort, depending on whether or not you wanted to increase the rent amount or change anything with the lease and so on. If you're interested in learning how I might handle this, just leave me a comment, let me know, and I'll get that added to the queue, and because I think that would be sort of an interesting addition to this workflow. But it automatically sends out the lease renewal. What I really like about this is that if you follow the same approach as you did when you sent out the original lease agreement for the new tenant, and by that I mean if you sent out a lease renewal and the lease had the word lease in it, what it's going to do is that when someone responds to this email with the lease attached, it's going to run through this workflow again. And because we have this node here where it's a create or update, it's just going to update this CRM with the updated lease details. And so you're doing very little, if any, manual hands-on effort. And all this data from the lease and the lease renewal is getting automatically added, which is awesome. And then when that happens, let's pull up the automation here. When that happens, when a record is updated, an email will go out. And the email will let the apartment manager know that someone renewed their lease. And that's it. That's all there is to this really simple workflow. As you can tell, there are only, a trigger and, 3 to 4 nodes. And this will offload hours of data entry off your plate. So to recap, this workflow will help you if you deal with leases and contracts and invoices. And if in your workflow, you need to pull the data out and store it somewhere for whatever reason. So if you have to do anything like that, this workflow should give you some ideas for how you might automate it. Now, if you'd actually like to get this workflow, I am making it available for free. To get it, all you need to do is go to my site and sign up for my email newsletter. My email subscribers are the ones who get any workflow automation I make available for free. So if you'd like to get on, if you'd like to get this automation for yourself, as well as the mind map I created for it, head there now and subscribe, and I'll send it to you right away. If you have any questions about this automation, or you just want to kind of leave me a comment, let me know what you thought of the tutorial, please do so below. And other than that, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and I'll see you in the next one.